The next step of the CAM process is to start generating some tool paths and things to make this, or to cut this cutting board out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Model and select CAM. And you'll notice this right away changes over all of my toolbars. So I've got a whole new scope of Fusion 360. Now, first thing I need to set up. So that's setting up the material that you're going to be using. I'm going to double click on Setup and it's going to come up with this box here. So we've got a few things to look at. First thing, type of operation. Now we're milling, so that's using our router. Turning, that's using like a lathe. And cutting, that's laser cutting, water jets, things like that. But we're milling, so we can just stick to that one. Now, work coordinate system, model orientation. You've got some other options there, but we'll just leave model orientation. And stock point. Now, this is where we want the XY to start. And remember when we were drawing it that we used this point down here. Well, I can click on that, and that's just going to move that point there. So I know when I'm zeroing the machine, I need to zero it on the corner of my wood. So that's good. That lines all that up. Model, I could have just clicked on model body, which would have set this up the same way. Next thing is I'm going to go over to stock. Now, it says relative size box. I'm going to set this to a fixed size box. So it just changes the dimension a little bit, but now I can see that my width is 180. Well, I know that my stock's 190, so I can just update that. It says my y-axis, my depth is 340. I'm going to just leave that as is for the time being. And it says my z height is 20. Well, I know my depth, or my z height is going to be 19. So I can model that as well. And you can see everything's centered. Model position is centered, so meaning that the model is centered within the stock. We're not going to worry about post-processors right yet. And I'm going to hit OK. So now I've got my setup. I've got the material in place. So after setup, we need to take a look at the tool paths. And if I click on 2D, I've got a whole bunch that we can use. We've got 2D adaptive clearing, pocket, face, contour, slot, trace, so a bunch of different things that we can do. I'm going to start off with just a 2D pocket. This is a very simple CNC operation. So if I click on that, it's going to bring up another window here. And it starts at the tool, and we're going to work our way down. Now, for the tool, I'm just going to click on select, and that's going to bring up, try to move this into the window there, this dialog box here. Now, there's a whole bunch of predetermined setups that we can use. It's all for metal. We're going to be using wood. So I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to click on the plus. So new mill tool. And that's going to bring up this dialog box. So we'll start over at the cutter and we'll start identifying what the cutter is that we're going to use. So we're not using a ball mill. We're going to use a flat end mill. A lot of the ones that we've got in the wood shop right now are single flute bits, so I'm just going to set that to 1. Our units are millimeters. I don't want any coolant, and we're using high-speed steel. So there's other types that you can use, but yeah, we're using high-speed steel. The diameter of the bit that we're starting with is going to be 6 millimeters, so I can just change that. The flute length on this bit that we've got is 24 millimeters. And the overall length is 35. So just a basic setup there of what our bit looks like. And you'll see, let's move this a little bit, that over here on the tooling, it updated as you made these changes. And say you want to make a change, maybe I got this wrong, it's 16. You can see right away that that's changing size. So this is just identifying what the bit looks like. So with all of that set up, I'm going to move over, let's move this back down so you can see, to feeds and speeds. Now Fusion tends to set things up for metalwork right away. We're going to bump up the 6 mil bit to 20,000 RPM, so it's 20,000 revolutions per minute, which is really fast, but our machine's capable of it. Now, if your machine's not capable of that sort of RPM, make sure that you're setting this to what your machine's capable of. Now, the cutting feed rate that we've been cutting with on our machine is 3,000 millimeters per minute, and that's giving us a feed per tooth of 0.15. That's about what we're looking for, but say you're using a smaller hobby machine, you might want to bump that down a bit to like 0.05. The machine that we're using with is quite powerful, so these settings are fine. If you're a little hesitant, you can also turn your feed rate down to a lower number. It's like, say if I was using 10,000 RPM instead of 20, I would set my cutting feed rate at 1,500. If I was using 1,000 RPM, or sorry, if I had this down to say 5,000 RPM, I would be saying 1,000 millimeters per minute. So there's some changes in here, but for the machine that I'm using, our Omni with a 6 kilowatt spindle, 20,000 RPM is fine, 3,000 millimeters per minute is going to work, and 0.15 millimeters feed per tooth. But if you want to be safe, slow this down to what your machine's capable of, and slow your cutting speeds down. If you really want to test this out, you can start off with 1,000 millimeters a minute and just try a couple cuts and ramp the machine up as you get used to it. So we can, once this is all done, I'm just going to go OK. We're going to save that tool to our project, and we're going to hit OK again. So now you can see that the tool is showing up on here. Looking at our window here, so I've selected my tool, check. We're using a wood router. We don't need any coolant, so we'll just turn that off. Our feeds and speeds are set from that last operation that we just did. So I'm not really concerned with anything here. Just a brief check over. We've got our spindle speeds correct, what we just set. Our cutting feed rates set, so we're good here. So we can move on to our next tab. Now our next tab is geometry. So it says pocket selection, nothing is selected. So I need to select some geometry. If I come in here and I click on my pocket, it says chain, and it selects everything that I need to do, which is good. That's what I want. You've got some other options here. We're not going to worry about any of those right now. That's for another tutorial down the road. Next tab over is my heights. So it's kind of funny. Everything else is top to bottom, but here it's kind of, you need to think bottom up. So bottom height, this is the depth that we're cutting down to. So remember how we did this extrusion, I think, to 4 millimeters? What we're going to do is we're going to set it to the bottom of that. So I'm going to say selection, and I'm going to zoom in and just select the bottom of that. And you'll see the bottom now is at -4. So it's gone from the top down to the level that we want. Now we could change this depth depending on what we want to do, but that's appropriate for now. Top height, stock top, well, 0 mil, that's where the top's going to be, yeah. 5 mil for our feed height, 5 mil for our retract height, and our clearance height is 10 millimeters. So this is feed and retract height. This is how high the bit is moving above the work when we're not cutting. We set it up to 5 so we know that it's going to clear everything as it goes around. Next one that we want to take a look at, this is our passes. Now, I'm going to uncheck stock delete for this, but say we were working with metal or a hardware that we really wanted a fine finish, we could leave a little bit of stock and come back at it really slowly and just clean it up nicely. We're going to undo that. We also have an option for multiple depths. 4 mil is okay for our tooling, but if we were taking more, we could set multiple depths. And say we want to do 2 passes, I could set a depth of 2. In this case, we don't need this. We'll just set that to 4 and uncheck multiple depths. So we don't need that. So just some basic stuff in there. The last one is our ramping in, and I'm not really concerned about linking the leads and transfers or the ramp. So all that done, I'll just move this, minimize some of this stuff so we can see what we're doing. And we're going to click OK, and we should see a tool path start generating. So if we look at it, you can see this blue line, and this blue line is symbolizing where that tool is going to go. It's coming in here, it's wrapping around from center out, and it's leaving there, cutting it out.